All right, if you want to just look at page 4 of your notes under Geography of Israel, I want to talk a little bit about just some of the mountains in and around Jerusalem, and then we will look at a software product that gives us kind of a tour of the mountains and the gates and some of those things. So 1C is Mount Zion. The word Zion means to protect, and it's the highest mountain in and around Jerusalem. It's about 2,540 feet above sea level. Mount Zion, though, the plateau, is only about 2,000 by 3,000 square feet. In the scriptures, it's often called the upper city, and generally speaking, upper cities or upper areas are wealthier areas. People like to be up on top, perched, looking down over others. People love a mountain view, or if they can't have a mountain view, they like something on next to the lake, so on and so forth. So it was the upper city, and in the days of Jesus, this area of Mount Zion was where the wealthy Sadducees in particular, not as many Pharisees, because they felt that to display one's wealth or opulence was unspiritual, and that you had to be a humble person. The Sadducees firmly believed in health, wealth, and prosperity preaching, that the wealthier you are, the more you were blessed, and they liked to live in the upper city. Second, what they call mountains, we would call hills, is Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is what you folks probably know the best as the Temple Mount. That's what you see on television all the time, where the Dome of the Rock is, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is. The word Moriah can mean to provide or to appear. It's a little bit smaller than Mount Zion, and it is that triangular area. We'll see it in the overheads, but it's the triangular area that takes in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, takes in the Dome of the Rock, and a good part of the Muslim quarter. And this was the temple area in the days of Jesus. It would have been the court of the women, the court of the Gentiles, the court of the men, the court of the priests, and everything surrounding the holy place and the Holy of Holies. The third one is the Ophel. The Ophel is also known as the City of David. Ophel means a place of swelling, and then it became known as a tower. How that fits together, unless a tower is something that swells up or bursts up above the city. But the Ophel was a little bit smaller. It was only about 400 feet wide, about 1,250 feet long. And the Ophel is all of Jerusalem that was comprised during the days of David. The Ophel is very important, though, because the spring of Gihon, Gihon, surfaces within the Ophel. And you might remember in the days of Hezekiah, when Sennacherib came to besiege the city of Jerusalem, that Hezekiah went out and stocked up all of the water sources, and then for the spring of Gihon, he built a tunnel from the spring of Gihon into the lower part of the city of Jerusalem, to what we know of in the days of Jesus as the Pool of Siloam or the Pool of Siloah. and he brought all the fresh water into the city of Jerusalem, so that when they were under siege, they would have water, but their enemies would not have water. And this is the Ophel. The Mount of Olives is well known to us because of the Garden of Gethsemane. And the Mount of Olives is directly to the east or opposite of the Temple Mount. It's the Mount of Olives where Jesus came across the Mount of Olives down the Kidron Valley and then up into the city of Jerusalem when he had his triumphal entry. The Mount of Olives is about 150 feet higher than Mount Moriah and Mount Zion. So you've got a beautiful kind of bird's eye view. It was on the Mount of Olives when Jesus and the disciples were walking across, and the disciples looked back on the Temple Mount and said, "Oh, what beautiful buildings." And then Jesus gave what we call the Olivet Discourse when he said, "Yeah, they're beautiful, but they're coming down because there's a judgment coming upon the city of Jerusalem." We will spend significant time next week on those prophetic discourses of Matthew 24, 25, 23, 24, 25, and Mark, Luke 21, Mark 13, and putting together all of that prophetic material. But the Mount of Olives is one of the places where Jesus, of course, went away with his disciples after the quote-unquote Last Supper, where he was betrayed. And today there are still olive trees that may have been rooted in the days of Jesus. The next one is Mount Scopus. Mount Scopus is not one that is known in the scriptures as much. The word scope, just like we have a telescope or something, means to see. And it is actually just to the north of the Mount of Olive range. Today, it is the site of the Hebrew University. It is also the site of the Mormon school. The Mormons bought up property on Mount Scopus secretly. Once they possessed it all, they started to build a school. You might remember me saying after they built the school, and a beautiful school, they built a phenomenal recreation athletics center. And then they were inviting all the students from the Hebrew University to come and use their athletic facilities for free because the Hebrew University did not have any athletic facilities. And they were proselytizing, trying to evangelize the Jewish students to Mormonism. That only lasted a couple of years, and the government stepped in and passed some laws, as well as raised a couple $100 million very quickly to build their own athletic center. So there is today what is called the Mount, the Mount of Ascension. I don't have that down here. The Mount of Abomination. The Mount of Abomination, also called the Mount of Offense, was at the very southern part of the Mount of Olives. It's a small knoll, and it got its name from 1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 7. And unfortunately, it's the Mount of Abomination because it is where Solomon allowed or required all of his wives to set up their temple gods for their temple sacrifices. Other people, other apostate Jews would set up, because it was a high area, and they would set up places of worship to Baal or Ashtarte or the different gods of the Canaanites and the Phoenicians, and that's how it got its name, the Mount of Abomination. You might remember me saying that when you look at the scriptures, any time that Solomon was going to cohabitate with one of his wives, he always had to go outside the holy city of Jerusalem, go down what is called the Tyropian Valley, across the Kidron Valley, and up to the Mount of Abomination, for it appears in his mind somehow he could not cross that line of bringing his idolatrous wives and concubines into the city. And so he housed them all on this area of the Mount of Abomination. There is another hill called the Mount of Evil Counsel, and we're going to see that's across the Hinnom Valley. Hinnom Valley is Gehenna or hell. It is kind of opposite of the Mount of Abomination, but there's a valley that cuts down through these two mountains. And this Mountain of Evil Counsel just coincidentally is where the United Nations has their headquarters in Israel today, on the Mount of Evil Counsel. But it was called on the Mount of Evil Counsel because it is another area where false prophets and false priests would go to prophesy or, quote-unquote, divine the will of God. So, minor mountains in Jerusalem, Mount Bazitha. Mount Bazitha is just north of Mount Moriah, outside of the walls of Jerusalem. It was an area that was known for armies that would come and stage a assault. Along with, next to that was Mount Acra, is another one that was on the northern part of the city. And when we see the city walls of ancient Jerusalem, you'll see they built all the high walls and all of the towers on the northern end. The reason is when, as we see the video or the particular programs, you'll see that the Tyropian Valley coming down through the middle, the valley, the Kidron Valley coming here, and the Valley of Gehenna or Hinnom coming from the other way, all provided deep natural fortifications for the city of Jerusalem. So the only way that you could reach the city of Jerusalem without having to climb up several hundred feet to get to the walls was to come in from the north. That was the geography of it all. If you can take your fingers and do something like this, this would be the Valley of Gehenna. This is the Kidron Valley, and this is the Tyropian Valley. And the city of Jerusalem came inside of it, but like this, with the Tyropian Valley coming right down the middle. And we'll see that when we look at our overhead maps and videos. Now, as far as valleys of Jerusalem, the Kidron Valley has also been called in Joel chapter 3, verse 2, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It's about 3 miles long, and it's about, today, it's about 100 feet lower than the base of the Temple Mount. In the days of Jesus, it probably would have been maybe 200 feet. The next one, the Tyropian Valley. Tyropian means cheesemakers or Central Valley. It's also known as the Central Valley. And this is a valley that runs right through the heart of Jerusalem from, when you look at the map, from the Damascus Gate all the way down to the Dung Gate, where they would take out all the garbage, which was the lowest point. The Tyropian Valley was kind of the central valley that helped drain all of Jerusalem. When they would have rains and flash floods, the Tyropian Valley would kind of be the sewer that would wash it all down into the very low parts of the valleys. The third one, the Hinnom Valley. The Hinnom Valley, also known as the Valley of Slaughter or the Valley of Gehenna or hell itself, it is only about a mile and a half long, but the Hinnom Valley was their place where they had all their burial caves and monuments. They still had some in the Kidron Valley, but the Valley of Gehenna was the main place by its natural structure. It had lots of caves, soft limestone where they could cut away and make greater rooms. I have crawled into a lot of places in and around Israel. But some of the fascinating ones are in the Valley of Gehenna, where you will crawl through, just a small window, go down a small hallway, and then it will open up into, dozens of burial chambers, all, picked through and put into burial chambers. And so, as well as the fact that the Valley of Gehenna came down to the very lowest point, and that's where they took all the garbage and they would burn everything. The lower it was, the winds generally would blow the smell of the garbage dump away from you. So that's how it became known as the Valley of Gehenna. The next valley is the Transversal Valley. And this is a valley, just as it says, trans. It cuts across the city of Jerusalem from the Jaffa Gate, we'll see, down to the western Wailing Wall. One of the things about the city of Jerusalem is, as long as you're going downhill, you will ultimately come to the western Wailing Wall. And that is, you can't get lost, because if you just say to yourself, okay, no matter where I am, I'm going to go downhill. And I'm going to just keep going downhill. Everything leads you right down to the western Wailing Wall, which is at the base of the Temple Mount. But the Transversal Valley was one that cut across from west to east, and today is somewhat along the road of what we call the Via Dolorosa. We'll skip the Bezetha Valley, not too important. Now, water supply of Jerusalem. First of all, you had the Gihon Spring. The word Gihon, they suggest it means gushing. And the Gihon Spring was the result of natural underground aquatic forces, where the water goes down into the rocks, it follows channels down below, and it surfaces at this low point. It is a gushing spring in that the pressures of the water reaches a certain amount, and then it kind of flushes through, although it's good, clear, clean water now, but it kind of flushes through, and it will raise up the water as much as 2.5 feet. So you can start in Hezekiah's tunnel. You can start at Hezekiah's tunnel at the place which is known as Warren's Shaft. Warren is the one that discovered it. Some believe that this was the shaft that David's men, Joab and others, came and infiltrated the city when David took the Ophel and conquered it, or when other people invaded the land, that the Warren's Shaft was where the Gihon Spring began. And then you know the story, how they started at both ends and they chipped their way along, and they had, they discovered from the days of Hezekiah a plaque inside the walls of the city that gave an account of how, as they got closer, they could hear each other picking at the other side, and how they broke through and they had such joy and the water flowed and everything. The plaque sat there for, let's see, how many years would it have been? 16, about 2,500 years before they discovered it, because Robinson, who originally found the Pool of Siloam and then saw the water trickling out, he initially had to get down on his hands and knees and crawl his way through the mud, pulling the mud back. And eventually he figured out that this was a complete tunnel, so they excavated the whole thing. But the Hezekiah's monument, or plaque, was up higher in a darkened area of the tunnel, just inside from the Pool of Siloam. So even after Robinson had discovered it, I think it was 10 or 15 years before somebody happened to look up and see this thing, and all the lettering on it, and cleaned it off. So, but it's a wonderful story of how they built this tunnel. The tunnel's like about 1,700 feet long. But I was going to say, when you get in it, you can get in it, and it'll be up to your knees. And then if you're going through and you catch a gush, it'll be up over your waist. And it's good, clean, rushing water now, but it does get a little cold. So very refreshing in the summertime. And you take flashlights or you take candles and work your way through. But the Gihon Spring was very important. To be the Ein Rogel Spring, this was a very important place, because this was a lower spring, probably connected actually to the Gihon Spring, because the Gihon Spring would reach a point at the Pool of Siloam, and then it would drain down. A few hundred yards from that was the spring Ein Rogel, and this was an area where, for instance, this is where when Solomon was going to take over the throne, his brother, was it Jeroboam? I'm trying to think who tried to usurp it away from Solomon.
It was his,
I'm not recalling.
Son, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
It was his son, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it was the son of David. Yeah, but not by Bathsheba. Rehoboam? Yeah, Rehoboam, Jeroboam, might have been Rehoboam. But you remember how he went down to Ein Rogel area, and he was announcing himself, and he had the priests helping him, and then David's advisor found out and tells Bathsheba, and Bathsheba tells Solomon, and Solomon comes down, and he's going to claim it. And of course, then this brother, stepbrother, races to the temple to get hold of the horns of the altar so that he can't be killed. But this was just a famous place for anointing, or for public declarations, or public speeches. So, 3b, the third source of water supply, major water supply for the city of Jerusalem, was water cisterns. And water cisterns are little more than natural caves or hollowed out caves that were designed to collect water during the rainy season. But the cisterns were massive, holding literally hundreds of thousands of gallons. They would plaster them if need be. There's a water cistern at Masada. Now, Masada's down by the Dead Sea. Absolutely gets rain only a couple times a year down there. They do get flash floods from rain that happens up in the mountains. But Herod the Great built himself 2 swimming pools up there. He had, and you're talking about 1,300 feet above the water table, or the Dead Sea area. But he had 2 big swimming pools there. He had a steam room, tripodarium, the middle temperature, and a cold room for himself, and massive water cisterns. If you were to go into the sanctuary, it'd be like maybe 3 times the size and height of the sanctuary. And he had it all plastered so that when the water came, what they would do is they would dam off the areas where the flash floods would come down. They'd create an entire wall and dam so that when it hit it, it would fill up and splash over into his cistern, and then they could fill it up, and they could be good for several years with that much water. But the whole city of Jerusalem underneath is like one massive water container because they had such a great need. In fact, the Herod built water channels as much as 20 miles in length just to carry all the water. And some of them are still functioning today, carrying water down to Jericho, carrying water down to the Pool of Siloam and other places like that. So they were brilliant in the sense that they didn't have anything else to do and they needed water, so they found these phenomenal ways of building. Here again, if you were to say, let's see, these blocks are what? Are they 10 inches or not? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, at the base of the Temple Mount, there are single ashlars or blocks of stone that would be like, I'm almost 6 foot, 2 feet higher than me, as much as 5 and 6 feet deep, and 40, 50 feet long. So big that we wouldn't be able to move them today with all of our machinery. But they figured out a way. So this is the city of Jerusalem. And in the days, like for instance in 70 AD, when they besieged Jerusalem, and then of course they broke through into the city, it took the Roman soldiers many months really to get all the people out. It's kind of like looking for Osama bin Laden with all of those caves and everything. There were so many tunnels, so many caves, so many underground sewage passages, so many other things that the people scurried into during the times of invasion that was very hard to find them. And these water cisterns were a great source. The other part of it is when you, at the Passover time and other times, when you are slaughtering literally tens of thousands of animals, you need a lot of water to just clean things up and flush things out. So that's the valleys of Jerusalem and the water supplies. Now, the city gates of Jerusalem. And we'll see these on the this program, the Pathways Through Jerusalem. But first of all, the Damascus Gate. The Damascus Gate was also called the Nablus Gate. It's the Triumphal Gate. For a lot of conquering kings came through it because it is the northern gate. It's the largest of the gates of Jerusalem. And it's called the Damascus Gate today because those who go out of it are going north, and they would be going up towards Damascus. It connected to the road that would take them up to Damascus. The Jaffa Gate is the one that most tourists come through because it's on the highest point of the city. It's also the gate that if you go out, you keep going that direction, you go down to Jaffa or Joppa. There is the Zion Gate. This was where the wealthy, again, Jews, the Essenes, the Sadducees, the priests would all come in and out of the Zion's Gate. It's the southernmost gate in the walls of Jerusalem. Then you have the Lion's Gate, and today it's also known as St. Stephen's Gate, because we believe from Acts chapter 7 that this would have been the gate or the area that they would have dragged Stephen out from and would have stoned him. Today it's called the Lion's Gate because when Suleiman the Magnificent, who was Islamic Arab Turk from the Ottoman Empire, when he conquered Jerusalem and rebuilt the walls, he put 2 lions up there, and his statement was that if anyone violated the walls, that they would be eaten by lions. Some people think they're panthers, but panthers, lions. Lion's Gate is what it's called today. The Dung Gate is, by its description, the practical place where people would haul all of their garbage out of. And this led them down to the Kidron Valley or the Valley of Gehenna. 6b, the Golden Gate, also called the Eastern Gate. This is the gate, obviously on the eastern side of the city of Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount. It's the gate that it says when Jesus Christ returns again, that he will enter through the Eastern Gate or the Golden Gate. Part of why it's called the Golden Gate is the sun, when the sun rises and shines on it, it just lights up with the brightest of the golden kind of sun reflection. Suleiman the Magnificent, when he rebuilt the Golden Gate, you might remember he sealed it all up. It's the only gate that is sealed up because he knew from Christian teachings that this was the gate that the Messiah would come through. So he was going to prevent the Messiah from coming through. And in order to prevent it, he sealed it up. The second thing they did was they buried literally thousands of Muslims on the hillside because they knew that Messiah was a priest. A priest couldn't walk amongst the dead, and therefore they could prevent him from doing it that way. The new gate is not a biblical gate at all. It was a gate, we tell you about it because it's part of the city of Jerusalem today. It was put in order to provide the Christian quarter or the Catholic section of the city of Jerusalem access to their neighborhoods and everything without having to go through everybody else's. And then finally, 8b, there is Herod's Gate. Herod's Gate is a northern gate. It's actually, although they go out the Damascus Gate, which is a northern gate to go up to Damascus, Herod's Gate is the most northern of them. And this led out to some of Herod's other palaces and structures. Today it's one of the best places to pick up a taxi. It's right across the street from, just blanked on their name, really, really wealthy Americans in history. They got a museum right there. Really nice one. I'll think of it in a minute. I'm just having a blank.
It's not Rockefeller.
Rockefellers, yeah. You know them, don't you? So, but the Rockefeller Museum, which is a really great museum. So, as far as the walls of Jerusalem, here again, the walls of Jerusalem are the highest on the northern end of the city because that is the area that has the least protection. So let's look at some of your maps, and I can try to reinforce what we want here. But the purpose of these quizzes is simply to get you familiar with the gates and the valleys, the cities and the mountains of Jerusalem and Israel. And you can take the quiz as many times as you would like, but the idea is to be able to name all of the gates, all of the valleys, and the different water systems. And for each one, you should have, or a quiz is required, you should have kind of a blank copy, and then you should have one with all of the answers as part of it also.
Blank copy,
Uh-huh.
water sources.
Right.
Quiz, there's a couple that I didn't mention.
All right. Let's see.
Pages W3 and W4.
Yeah.
I also didn't see on here where the enrollable spring
Yes.
was.
Yep.
I don't know if that's correct.
No, because it's kind of down below the pool of Siloam. So maybe we could, if we could look at this one, which has the Christian quarter, the Muslim quarter, it has the valleys on it, and I can clarify a little bit there for us. On this particular chart, the W1 is the Gihon Spring. W1 is the Gihon Spring. And then that snake-like line that goes down to W2 is the Hezekiah's Tunnel. So, are you with me on this one? This is the one that you'll be taking as a quiz. Pardon me? No, it might be extra credit. So, yes.
Okay, so Hezekiah's tunnel is W2?
No.
No, it's W4?
No. W1, just let me tell you, W1 is Gihon Spring. W2 is the pool of Siloam.
Is that S-I-L or S-H?
Well, it's a lot of different things. S-L-I-S-I-L-O-A-M is good. Sometimes they say Shalom, S-H-I-L-O-A-M. Sometimes they say Shiloah because of the different Aramaic, Hebrew, or Greek pronunciations and transliterations of it. But W1 is the pool, is the Gihon Spring. That's where you get in and it's only up to your knees. By the time you get down to W2, which is the pool of Siloam or Siloah, then you could be up and over your waist. And that's the W2. The W4s are the water cisterns. These are major water cisterns that exist in the city of Jerusalem. And then W3 is the pool of Bethsaida. You remember when Jesus found the man who was lame, and he says to Jesus, what was he waiting for? He was waiting for the angel to trouble the water and for someone to pick him up and to put him in so that he could be healed. Interestingly, one of my professors from years ago, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Charles Shaw, who taught at Detroit Bible College years ago, for many, many years was a missionary in and around Israel and Jerusalem for the Bedouin tribes. He would primarily go out into the desert and try to evangelize the Bedouin tribes. A man that God greatly used, knew Sir Lawrence of Arabia, Sir Lawrence of Arabia, knew many, many of the powerful sheikhs that ended up taking over the nations such as Jordan and others. And in his spare time, he enjoyed trying to reenact some of the Old Testament things or the archaeological things. For instance, with Warren's Shaft, where the men of David went to get him some cold water and went into the city in the invasion, how they went up through the shaft. He said that he reenacted that with another guy. How they did it was they had two, they didn't call them spears, although they could have put a spear on it, but two very strong beams of wood that they cut, from branches of trees. And he said they were able to crawl up by putting their back to back, pushing against each other and crawling up with the sticks. And they were able to crawl up the shaft quite easily. Even today, people debate and say, oh, nobody could have done that, even though the archaeologists who have excavated Warren's shaft and other places have demonstrated with students. Now, the students were usually like 6'4", 6'5", like Spider-Man or something, that they could press against the walls and work their way up. But the account of David wasn't that one person did it, that a few did it. And Dr. Shaw said they were able to do it quite nicely by just back-to-back pushing against each other, using their sticks and crawling right up the shaft. The other thing that he did was that even, and this would have been like in the 1920s, before World War I, in the 1920s, he was there all the way through into the 1950s, I think, before he came over back to the States. But even in the 1920s, the Arabs who lived in Jerusalem would sit around the very pool of Bethsaida and believed that an angel, they believed it from the New Testament, would trouble the waters, and that the first one in could be healed. He told us that the waters at that time were particularly filled with lime and minerals and different things, that if you had skin diseases or infections, that it was very, very good to get into the water. And so lots of people got into the water and found themselves blessed or healed or restored or medicinalized somewhat by that. But he said there really was this phenomenon of the water stirring periodically. And so he decided he would do a couple of experiments. And one of the things he did was he got one of his graduate students who was working with him, and they went up to a pool that was about 150 or 200 yards above the pool of Bethsaida. And they noticed that periodically that pool would have kind of a sucking motion where it would suck air. And so they went up there, and he told the grad assistant that as soon as the water creates that sucking, you pour what he had was dyed red water, into the pool, and let's see where it goes. And so as he described it, the grad student says it's sucking. He says pour the water. He goes running down, and just as he gets down to the pool of Bethsaida, he sees the red dye burp up, and up comes all of this red dye. And so his explanation, at least in the 1920s, was that it was a natural phenomenon that people still continued to follow from the superstition of the New Testament. Now, when you read the New Testament, it doesn't really say that an angel, it's not exact that it's a real fact. It could be a superstition that they were even believing or following in that day. But the wonderful thing is that we see in the Gospels that Jesus does heal a man, and it becomes another testimony of his divinity. So it could have been just a natural phenomenon, or it could have been that God chose in those days to do some special miracles out of pure compassion to be able to show his care for the people. But that's the pool of Bethsaida. The Temple Mount, I think I'll wait on that to provide more description of that, because we're going to see it in the different presentations. On this particular page, Valley 1 is the Valley of Gehenna. Valley 2 is the Transversal Valley. See how it transes across? If you trans something, you're crossing it. You see Valley 2 starts at the Jaffa Gate, goes down to the western wall. Valley 3 is the Tyropian Valley. Valley 4 is the Kidron Valley. And after you see these on the different aerials, the visuals, I'm sure that it will be easier for you to remember them. So, when you do the quiz, all you have to do for the quiz is, just be able to put in Damascus Gate, Herod Gate, Lions Gate, Eastern Gate, Dung Gate, Zion Gate, so on and so forth. And so that you can work your way around the city. When you study the book of Nehemiah, you get into that where Nehemiah gives a great description of following the walls and the different gates and rebuilding them. So, all right, let's take a short break till 1:45. I'm going to set up and get the software ready, and then we'll go through the gates and all of this information by visualizing it. What's our entree this evening?
Valley of Gehenna.
Chicken Alfredo soup.
Chicken Alfredo soup. Alfredo would mean like a little Italian to it?
Yes.
All right. Very good.
Okay.